10 women have launched a class action lawsuit against Canadian clothing manufacturer Peter Nygard.
Under investigation for rape.
A number of women claim they were victims of what they call a sex trafficking ring.
Dozens of women from Canada, the U.S., and the Bahamas have now come forward to accuse Peter Nygard of sexual assault, including rape. Most of the allegations are from recent years, but the Fifth Estate has also uncovered cases that are decades old, including what you're about to hear from this woman, who says that Nygard raped her in 1980, and that when she tried to go public with her story years ago, powerful Winnipeggers made sure all the details were kept secret. That is, until now. Peter Nygard began his fashion empire in Winnipeg, and by the 1990s he was one of the city's most prominent business leaders. Reporter Catherine Mitchell covered Nygard for the Winnipeg Free Press.
Definitely people knew who Peter Nygard was and what Nygard International meant to the city.
But a darker side of Peter Nygard was about to emerge. In 1996, Mitchell and another journalist learned about a story with the potential to shake up Winnipeg and Nygard. Mitchell reported that 3 of Nygard's female former employees had launched sexual harassment complaints against him with the Manitoba Human Rights Commission.
The allegations were that he would make sexual comments constantly, sort of in the joking manner. He would touch them inappropriately, like touching their bodies, so they had those complaints.
The article was published on a weekend. By Monday, Mitchell's voicemail at the Free Press was full.
A number of them were saying, you should call this person, call this person.
One of the names she got was a former Nygard employee living in Denmark, Jonna Laursen.
I managed to reach her and interview her over the phone. I mean, she certainly didn't seek the public spotlight on this, but in her case, I think what was compelling spoke to her credibility and integrity to a degree, is that she documented this. She made notes.
But the Winnipeg Free Press never published Jonna Laursen's story about Peter Nygard.
I guess the one regret that I had was that, yeah, definitely Jonna's story deserved to be told.
This past winter, we went to Denmark to track her down and to hear her story for ourselves. Today, Jonna Laursen is 72, but in the early 1980s, she was a single mother from Denmark with a flair for fashion, hoping to start a new life in Canada.
I have never been afraid of trying new things. And my job in Copenhagen was finished, so I left and I fell in love with Canada right away. I was very good at being a seamstress and designing things.
Eventually, she landed a job in Winnipeg, working for Nygard.
She was very competent, she's articulate, attractive. She was very friendly, she was very welcoming, and I think she was doing a very good job.
In fact, before long, Peter Nygard took her on a business trip to Asia. Decades later, Jonna Laursen admits the whirlwind itinerary to Hong Kong and Taipei is now a blur, but she still remembers being shown to her room by the hotel manager.
I was just a country girl still at that time. I'd never seen anything like it. One room connected to another room. The door was open. I said, well, I like you to lock the door, and I want to make sure it's locked.
Reassured, she says she fell into bed, exhausted by the overseas flight. But then, in the middle of the night,
there was somebody in my bed. And I woke up and I saw it was Nygard, and I was about to say something, and he put his hand over my mouth. He said, oh, just don't worry, you're a nice girl, and I'm not going to hurt you, and yeah. But he raped me. Yeah. After he left, I got up and I sat in a chair and I cried, and I remember when I sat there and sitting in the chair crying that everything was just a bit a mess.
Back in Canada, she says the atmosphere at work was changing, that Peter Nygard began to harass her.
Nygard had been on my back for quite a while, yelling and screaming, I think because I started to develop a lot of resentment. I thought he was a jerk.
Finally, in the summer of 1981, Jonna Laursen says she was forced out of her job with Peter Nygard's company.
She phoned me and she was very upset.
Jonna had confided in her friend and fellow employee Dale Dreffs about what took place in Asia.
She was in a foreign country. Who was going to believe her? She's a single mom. She needed her job. And she had just kept it to herself until this happened, and then she was very angry.
Distraught, she eventually threatened to go to the press and the police.
Nygard got wind of it, and she was offered a cash settlement and a letter of recommendation.
For 15 years, Jonna says she didn't talk much about what had happened to her. Then she decided to tell it all to the Winnipeg Free Press. Catherine Mitchell did the interview. The question is, why didn't it appear in print? The newspaper's publisher at the time was Rudy Redekop, who says he got pressure from top business leaders in Winnipeg, people he calls Nygard's compatriots and Winnipeg kingpins. He says he worried the reporting might be sensationalist. What's more, Peter Nygard threatened a lawsuit. Catherine Mitchell says she and the majority of the newsroom disagreed, but their boss killed the coverage anyway.
It was made clear that we weren't going to continue with the story.
Today, former publisher Rudy Redekop says that was a different time, and he now admits that maybe we should have proceeded with the Nygard story. Recently, Peter Nygard's lawyer sent us a statement saying Mr. Nygard was not involved in any attempt to stop the publication of a story about unreliable, false, and malicious allegations. Unable to find another job in Winnipeg, in 1982, Jonna Laursen and her daughter Zitta returned to Denmark. Jonna eventually married, is a grandmother, and lives a quiet life in a town on the shores of a northern fjord. And now, almost 40 years later, Jonna's full story is finally being heard.
It still affects me.
Is that in part why you're telling this story?
Yes, it is. Like, I don't get anything out of telling my story except maybe a bit more peace inside. It's good having my daughter here as well. I never think that I really told her the details. It's unpleasant, but yet I feel good about her knowing it. I ask myself for some peace and breathing space after all those years.